Hello everyone, Kent Bresler here. I want to welcome you to Kent's Kidney Stories. During our time together over these podcasts, I'd like to discuss kidney disease. I'd like to tell you about my journey as a transplant patient, but also talk about dialysis, kidney donation, and just about anything else that might be of interest. Kent's Kidney Stories, a podcast endorsed and sponsored by kidneysolutions.org. Hello, everybody. This is Kent Bresler, and we're going to do some podcasting today. We love to do podcasting because we always have special guests, and boy, do I have one today. Just want to let you know Kathy's doing very well. She's recovered very well in walking and doing his exercises, and she's off therapy now. So I guess I'm going to have to start working when she starts sending out those lists. So let's get started. I have a great guest today. So let me just say a prayer for us. Heavenly Father, we look forward to this Lenten season with fervor. We know that your willingness to watch over us and care for us is paramount to everything that we do. Our faith is strong here at Kidney Solutions. And I want you to understand very carefully and think very hard about looking and gracing all the people that are on our waiting list. They need kidneys. We know that people in this horrible disease, 12 of them die every day just waiting on a kidney. We know you have a purpose and a regular mission, and we ask you to look down upon them and help them in any way that you possibly see fit. And in general, help this podcast go very well today. This is a very special guest and a very special friend of mine, and I would like to go very well with it. And I'm asking for your graces. In your name I pray, amen. Okay, folks, today it's a big day. It's Ash Wednesday, and I have a very, very special guest. I'm going to talk about all kinds of things that we're doing at Kidney Solutions, like our walk and all of that. But I'm going to save that for another day because this man has graced me with the chance to talk about something that's near and dear to me. And it's a disease process that he knows a lot about. And he runs a great organization called NephCure, NephCure. NephCure works solely with patients and doctors and does an awful lot of research and develops pharmaceuticals. And these things are very advantageous to us in the community who have FSGS and other nephrotic syndromes. He's going to give us a clue at what they're doing at NephCure because it's changed considerably since I first began it some 20 years ago, 15, something like that. This gentleman's name is Josh Tarnoff. And I'm going to let you listen to him tell his story about NephCure because it's very, very important that we get this information out. So, Josh, I'll tell you what, thank you so much for coming in. I just don't even know where to start.
Ken, you've been an amazingly patient man with me, and it's really an honor. I mean that with all sincerity to be here today. And you've attended so many of our events and been supportive of so many other patients on their journey. So I thank you sincerely, and it's an honor to be here with you today.
You know, we started out at NephCure many, many, many moons ago. We developed a registry and we did all kinds of things. And then the focus changed. And at first I thought, I don't know if it's a good change, but over the last 5 years, I've had a good place in my heart for NephCure. They are leaders as a 501c, leaders in taking care of patients. They're focused on patients with FSGS, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, and other nephrotic syndrome diseases. Explain to me your role as the top exec at NephCure.
Oh boy, I get the honor, and it really is a privilege, and I mean that with all sincerity, of being part of the organization, being able to lead some incredible people. And what's amazing about the organization is that everybody's there. It's not a job; it's a passion. They're committed to patients, and our mission is a little bit. We're a bit of an odd duck. The organization was founded about 22 years ago by four families that were impacted by FSGS. And at the end of the day, they had two goals in mind. And one was, of course, support patients like any patient advocacy organization, support patients on their journey, especially rare disease. You can fill up any football stadium in America, and maybe there's one FSGS patient in there, and it's hard to find, and you feel so lonely because, gosh, I never even heard of this, and I don't know anybody else that has it. And so you got to go back 22 years, and this is almost before the internet, and not much was known about these diseases. And
Mm-mm.
so, the first thing was, hey, let's support patients, make sure they don't feel alone, and support them as much as we can. And the second part of the mission really was, okay, what's the best thing you can do for my child or my spouse? Get me a cure, will you? find,
Yeah,
find,
I've been
find,
waiting.
right? And this is back in the dark ages. It's only 20 years ago, but the reality is we didn't understand, fancy word, pathophysiology, which is a fancy word for how does this disease tick, right? How does it
How does it work?
progress,
Hmm.
right? And you get down to the tissue level and then the molecular level, and we now know today that wow, it's complicated. But
Oh,
22 years ago, we didn't even understand the basics. So the NephCure mission really is twofold. One, support patients, and what that means is be there for them, but also make sure that we are providing a full complement of options for care. Um, one of the things that people don't realize is when they get a diagnosis, and you've probably gone through this with your journey years ago. You go through your family practitioner, and then eventually they recommend you to a nephrologist. But of the 12,000 nephrologists we have in this country, only a few hundred deal with FSGS on a regular basis. And they're called glomerular disease specialists. And so the odds of a new patient getting to one of these folks early is not
ah,
great.
yeah,
So, and the field has changed so dramatically. Back in the old days, the only thing we had for you was dialysis and transplant and steroids, right?
yep,
Well, today
yep,
that's changed dramatically. We'll talk about it, but one of the things we want to make sure is that the patient gets to a glomerular disease specialist as part of the care team early when we can make a difference.
yep.
So that's something very special. And then we can talk about also, what we're doing because the landscape, man,
Man, it's
if
changed. Oh
someone's
my goodness.
diagnosed today,
Right.
it's so different. Yeah.
Yep. The main thrust of therapy still is rest with FSGS, rest with steroids and that, but that's changing considerably. I remember the first time when I was diagnosed when Dr. Mulgrew says, "Well, we're gonna start you on prednisone." And that prednisone, as what is well known in the world, it's pretty tough drug to have to take, and they put it at high doses to try to suppress the FSGS, the disease process itself. And it's not it just doesn't, in all honesty, just doesn't work. I mean, but it's all we have, right? And
Yeah.
so for many
It's all we
years,
had.
yeah, it's all we've had. Yeah. And so
Um,
that's the kick point right here that we need to really look at, because a lot of people with FSGS still have it, and then they start them out on high dose prednisone, high dose of steroids, and then a lot of people get in there and they have the transplant, and that this dadgum stuff, this FSGS, attacks the new kidney. So it's not. This is not a fun disease to have. I've been blessed, 36 years with my brother's kidney, and nothing's returned. And I know people that it returns within hours after transplant. So what's the key here? What is the takeaway on that whole lot process of treatment?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because the world is a different place today than when you and I. Here's a funny story. Years ago, boy, I'm now 60, and this was back in my I think late 30s. Um, I was bit by a rattlesnake, and I was out in Colorado with my kids, and we
Oh
were
no.
along a stream, and I sat out on a rock without looking, and the rock was occupied.
Yeah,
So you can just use your imagination where he bit me. Um, so
not
you know,
funny.
not fun, and that led later not to nephrotic syndrome, but a form of interstitial nephritis where yeah, I was on high dose steroids off and on for a year to get this cleared up. And what people don't realize is prednisone, which is widely prescribed for bee stings, for poison ivy,
Hmm.
people go on low dose like 5-10 milligrams. And the majority of people on low dose, 5-10 can't finish because they can't sleep, they get manic, you're peeing all the time.
Yep.
So guys like you and me and folks who have had therapeutic doses for kidney, you're talking 40 to 80 milligrams a day.
I took 100.
Wow. Okay, that's
I took
that's
100 for
really
2 weeks.
so you know what that does to you. And I had to
Yep,
quit my job because I was just manic all the time, and it really impacts you. And it is what people don't realize. It's an immunosuppressant.
it
So
is.
it suppresses your immune system. What that means is now you're vulnerable to all kinds of other ills, infections, and even cancer. And when kids, especially, get put on prednisone, we really worry because there's growth that's stunted, and it is no free ride with prednisone. It's something that the only thing we had for years. It has some effect, but boy, we're trying to get away from it. And thank goodness, um, we're now at a point where there are therapeutic options that have come on, and we have in clinical trial right now, there's over 60. When we say clinical, we're talking about human trials now
Right, actually human trials. Yes.
with different, agents that, prednisone, if it had to go through trials today, probably would never get approved. The side effects were too dramatic, and the FDA would say, forget it, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
we're trying to get past that. It has a place, but when you have no other options. But we have other options today, and that's the good news.
Well, this clinical trials has me excited because like having this for over 40 years and having great friendships with many, many people who have FSGS. I got to ask the question, what are the options now to a patient? What are those? Let's just cut to the chase and what are their options? That's what
You bet.
patients need is an option.
So the good news is, so you think back, so you remember the days. I mean, there was nothing going on in research, and part of what NephCure did in the early days was invest about $40 million of just figuring out the disease. Like, what's the pathway? How
Hmm.
does this disease
Hmm.
do its thing?
Hmm.
What are the, not getting all technical, but what are the chemical and physiological pathways that go down and cause this disease? And we now know that FSGS in particular is not just one disease, it's more of a
It's
syndrome,
not.
right?
It's not.
So we say it's part of nephrotic syndrome, but it's a syndrome within a syndrome, which is really getting complicated. And at NephCure, we represent all protein spilling diseases, so rare protein spilling. So if you have membranous nephropathy, FSGS, IgA nephropathy, minimal change, et cetera, C3G, um, those are where we get involved. And so uh, what has happened was amazing. I got to give a lot of, it was really a community effort here. How we get to these trials and the options was that drug companies, they have to make a profit, right? So, big diseases, yeah, lots of patients, but rare disease,
Very
and it's
hard.
hard. Why would I do research in a rare disease? And I'm not even sure what the approval pathway is. And we got to give a lot of credit here to the FDA, especially a doctor named Elisa Thompson, who's been an amazing champion. And the FDA looked at this and said, "Wow, we'll develop look at something called a surrogate biomarker. So what's a surrogate biomarker? Well, if I look out my window and I see as far as the eye can see, it's wet. I think it rained, right? Um, so a surrogate biomarker is a measure for something that is in place of the actual outcome. So for us, for you and I, it would be, hey, you know, get rid of my kidney disease, get my glomerular filtration rate up at a higher level, and keep my kidney. Well, doing those trials are really long and expensive, and they're cost prohibitive for drug companies. So this strategy of using a biomarker, which in our case is protein in the urine,
Protein,
so
exactly.
proteinuria, right?
Protein.
So the FDA worked with a whole bunch of other partners and came up with this model. And when that happened, all of a sudden, wow, now drug companies got interested because there's a way forward. And so literally back in 2017, not long ago,
Gee whiz,
we when
17.
that happened, we went from 2 clinical trials in nephrotic syndrome to now over 60.
Yeah. Yeah. See,
That was
there's
the big aha moment, right? And
that's
so
that's that's what we're talking about, the difference between now and 50 years ago, 40 years ago. It's
and
amazing.
it's really is and it's a team effort. Really, it's NephCure, other organizations like NKF and Kidney Health Initiative with the ASN, and
Yep.
working together as a community to really evolve this strategy. And we actually have our first 2 drugs approved for IgA nephropathy. If you're
Yep.
folks who are listening have IgA, there are 2 drugs on the market.
And their names
Uh,
are?
so we've got the first, it was Phil
Yep.
Sparry from a
Yep.
company in San Diego called Travere.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is another drug which is generic budesonide,
You
which is a
definitely. Yep.
you know taken orally, and that drug is from a company called Calliditas in Sweden, and both are approved. Both are different mechanisms, which is kind of cool. So you can actually combine them if you need it. Um, but now our folks with IgA nephropathy, they don't have to take immune suppression. They have options, and so that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. And is there a crossover between that? IgA is not like, uh, it's not mirroring FSGS. It's similar, but it's a nephrotic syndrome. But what's the crossover here? Is there any link between using these drugs later on for FSGS?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the truth is good news is yes. A lot of the mechanisms underlying IgAN overlap with membranous nephropathy and FSGS, and so if you look at the drug that I mentioned, Filspari from
Right.
Travere, they actually had 2 trials going on, one for IgAN and one for FSGS, and so right now the data came back for FSGS, and they were able to lower proteinuria by 50%,
Yeah.
and so that's great news, but we were using an endpoint called EGFR slope without getting complicated.
Right.
Maybe probably not the most appropriate one in and of itself as an endpoint. So, NephCure partnering with the Kidney Health Initiative and the International Society of Glomerular Disease is really leading with the FDA the charge to look at this. And we have a program called Parasol that we believe by the end of the year will yield a, perhaps an expanded set of endpoints to allow that drug and many others to have a path toward approval. So, yeah, the great news is many of these drugs will start with one type of nephrotic syndrome, right? So I'll do membranous first. And then when I get what's called proof of concept, it looks like it's good, I'm going to start my next trial in
In
FSGS or IgAN and vice
FSGS.
versa.
Right. So one of the interesting things about these nephrotic syndrome disease processes and kidney disease is that they're very progressive, but they can start really early. And can kids get this. This is something that can go on for years before, and I think it's in what happened in my case. I had this long before I realized it in early adulthood. So is there a focus on really early research into
Yeah.
drugs or whatever? Is there really a heavy research for kids, for young people?
Yeah, without sounding melodramatic, we're in a new era, and I hope everybody's listening is really, this is serious in that when we didn't have drugs or, what can I do for you if you had chronic kidney disease, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, there were steroids and, you really
Dialysis.
were looking at transplant dialysis.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true anymore. And we've got to get to a point where get past where, you were probably told, well, you got some protein in urine, but it's not that bad.
Let's just
We'll
watch
watch it, right?
it. Yeah.
We've got to get today to a point where we take it seriously and where we say a little bit of protein in your urine is like a doctor telling you, don't worry about it. You just have a little bit of cancer, right?
Yeah. A little bit. Right.
So, sorry, you need to take even the small amount of protein in urine seriously because here's the deal nobody can guarantee that it's not going to be aggressive and get worse quickly.
It's unpredictable.
Right. So if your doctor or your healthcare provider is telling you we're just going to watch it, all right, you need to contact NephCure or call Kent, and we'll get you another doctor to add to your care team because that's not acceptable anymore.
And there, you know what? Bless nephrology's hearts. There are not very many people, like you said, in the nephrology world that are advanced enough to have studied this, but be really good on it, emotionally involved and really getting with that. So we have to expand that. The nephrology community needs to be expanded tremendously.
Yeah.
That's really not the focus here. But what the focus is on the fact that there is now options for patients.
The one piece of advice to give people today is you need to get to somebody who sees this disease often, right? I always say, would you jump out of a plane with a skydiving instructor who only goes once a year? Well, the average nephrologist sees a new case of FSGS once a year. So,
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
look, nephrologists are incredibly smart people. It's
Oh
a
man.
specialty that attracts a really cerebral type, and they're angels, right? They're great
Oh,
people.
yep.
But the
Yep.
problem
No
is
doubt.
you don't see it often enough. You can't keep up. And the reality is that most nephrologists spend their day doing dialysis. That's where
Yep.
they make most of the money and most of the patients they see. I'm not saying that it's motivating by finances, but that's what you see are people mostly with diabetic kidney disease or hypertensive kidney disease. And rare is just that. It's rare.
It's rare. Yeah.
So you need to get to a clinician and add this clinician to your care team who is a glomerular disease expert, because these are the folks who right now are aware
Forefront.
of these 65 trials, are aware that, hey, you know what? There's off-label utilization of things like Rituxan, new protocols, and all these other drugs that are being utilized, and care options for clinical trials that were not available even just a few years ago. So you really need to see somebody. That's the most important advice we can give anybody. Early, early, early. Make sure that you're seeing the right doctor.
Okay, so the floor here says that you don't refer a patient into that nephrology world until they're stage 4, essentially. And that's got
That's
to change,
Yep.
but because they're quote too busy. But does NephCure have or speak to this a roster of these glomerular specialists? Do you have a roster of them
Yep.
countrywide?
So here's the deal. Just go on our website, nephcure.org, and you will find several things. First of all, we're your new best friend.
That's
We
right.
have people like Montrez Lucas and Kelly Helm who you call, we'll answer the phone and walk you through everything. It's new, it's scary, but the bottom line is yes, we have a list of pre qualified, vetted glomerular disease specialists throughout the country and throughout the world. And these are folks who have to satisfy a bunch of criteria to be on this list.
On the
And
list. Yeah,
they,
exactly.
and believe it or not, one of the things, the criteria is that they have to give out their cell phone number to you as a patient. They're that much that intimate, right?
Yeah, really. That's great.
And they're awesome. And bottom line is they're here to work with your physician. So
Yeah.
breaking up with your doctor is always uncomfortable. And we're not saying you have to break up with your doctor, but involve one of these specialists in the care team. And these doctors, these glomerular disease specialists, are trained to work with not necessarily replace your existing doctor. So we can avoid that awkwardness a bit. And
Re,
we'll hold
re,
your hand and all the
yep.
questions you need to ask your doctor, et cetera. So that's the key. Yeah.
Repeat that. They do not replace your current nephrologist. They're a
Unless
go-to.
you want them to.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Unless you want to. That again, it's that option thing. But they consult? Is that how they work? Just do a
Right,
direct consult,
exactly.
doctor to doctor consult, the way it should be.
So, many of us who have been in the hospital for one reason or another, somebody who may have gotten an infection. There's an infectious disease specialist, right? Well, that's not your primary care doctor. They come in as needed and help out and they depart. And that's the model with these glomerular disease experts, which is, hey, I'm running clinical trials, I'm doing research, I'm doing all these things, and I'm here to help your primary nephrologist. So we're trying to get past that fear that the general nephrology community has. Hey, they're going to steal my patient. Oh, trust me, they're not going to steal your
No. It's
patient.
been my experience in 40 years of nursing, working with all kinds of patients, but in the last 20 years working with kidney patients, most physicians do not want to handle, and I'm serious about this, they'll tell you this, they don't want to handle kidney patients. They are not well enough knowledge-wise to take on an intensive care person who has FSGS and is in crisis, or has kidney failure and is in crisis. The first thing they do is pick up the phone. Let's get nephrology in here.
It's funny you say that, and I'm glad because that's almost like the little secret of the community, which is when you see your average nephrologist and you as a rare disease patient come in there, they're kind of cringing most of the time because they're not sure what to do with you. They
Oh,
don't see it more than once a year and they go, oh man. So even for those of us who stay contemporary with all the stuff going on, it's hard for us to keep up with all of
sure it
these things.
is.
Right?
Sure it is.
So it's impossible for somebody who sees a new case of FSGS once a year to stay current. And trust me, guys, there's a revolution going on right now. At the American Society of Nephrology meeting, which is the professional group
Yep.
that of 12,000 that meets every year in some big city. And they have a convention hall, right? And the exhibit hall. And so all the companies who dialysis and transplant, if you went to this exhibit hall 5 years ago, all you would see would be dialysis and transplant companies.
Yeah.
You go there today, I was almost tears in my eyes. Most of the companies in the exhibit hall at the American Society of Nephrology this year were drug companies. We now have therapeutics approved for CKD. So you've probably seen on TV already,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Do you have
Yep.
CKD? Take
Yep.
Sarsiga and all these other drugs.
Yep.
So these SGLT2 inhibitors that were used originally for diabetes have been discovered to have great efficacy in the
Lowering
general
protein.
population, right?
Yeah.
And a number of physicians are using those off label in rare kidney disease. And
Hmm.
these companies are studying these drugs. So huge. And then you go to the rare kidney disease where we're talking about today, where NephCure and Kidney Solutions live. The reality is that the majority of the exhibitors in the exhibit were rare kidney disease. So membranous nephropathy, FSGS, IgAN. And so it is a true new era where we actually have drugs to treat this disease now. And more just it's about the bubble's about to burst. There's so many coming out soon.
Well, it brings me to think about this is one question I really want to how is this going to advance? Look in your crystal ball and tell me how this is actually going to explode. All right.
Yeah,
Because most people listening are thinking, well, the doctors there, and then they got the drug companies involved in it, and the drug companies are this, that. The trouble is that if you don't have research, you've got nothing, right? You
boy,
have absolutely nothing. We've had absolutely nothing for 40 years. And now, so what is the magic bullet here? What do you see as coming down the pike that's really going to make a difference in kidney?
truer words have never been spoken. The research component. We surveyed people at NephCure several years ago about participation in clinical trials. You know what the number one reason for people participating in clinical trials was? It wasn't what you
Money.
think. It wasn't money. It wasn't hey, I'll find a cure for my disease for me. It was giving back. It's an amazing community we have in the rare disease. The number
Yep.
one reason was I want to give back.
Yep.
So it's a great brotherhood and sisterhood of people we have. And at the end of the day, so your question was, all right, how does this
Yeah. How do
pop
you
this,
see it
right?
exploding? How do you see it actually working its way out of where it's at now? Because it's advancing, and you
So
know how
step,
medicine goes quick. It may take
yeah,
20 years to get there, but as it snowballs, it goes very quickly. Do you see that happening?
yeah. The big change was, as we talked about, when the FDA
Mm-hmm.
allowed the use of the
Mm-hmm.
surrogate biomarker measuring protein in the urine as a measurement for success. We went from literally none to two to five to 13 to now 65 in just a matter of 5 years.
Yep. Five
And
years.
and how does that happen? Well, a lot of companies were looking at other indications for their drugs. So believe it or not, that's why you see these SGLT2 inhibitors. Well, they were diabetes drugs. And you
Mm-hmm.
found, wow, I can use it for kidney. So what we're doing is seeing a pivot of a lot of these drug companies now taking an interest in rare kidney disease because there's a pathway to approval, right?
Right.
And so we as a specialty or as a rare kidney disease world, we had to get ourselves organized in the past several years. And you've been part of that, Kent, many meetings about participating in clinical trials, because without the clinical trials, we don't get the drugs.
Nope.
So here's the good news. These drugs go through what's called three phases of clinical testing. So, if some of your folks listening, phase one is safety, phase two is the right dose, phase three is what they call efficacy. Let's
Efficacy.
make
Yeah.
sure it works and everything is clean. There are a tremendous amount of therapies right now in phase two and phase three, which are the last two of a long journey that sometimes takes 15, 20 years.
That's
And
called the
that's
pipeline.
why
Yeah.
we're so close.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and you're having a relapse and your doctor's saying, well, let's put you on prednisone or put you on an off-label cancer drug, right? That's the other thing that's also highly immune suppressant that we've been tolerating, or we're taking cancer drugs to treat this, right? Well, you
Right.
have an option now to participate in a clinical trial. And it's the best care you're ever going to get in your life because it's being run by these glomerular disease specialists. The FDA is watching, that's highly regulated, so you're going to get the best care and the best observation of your disease management. And you get access for free to something that could be kidney and life saving.
Right. It's a monitoring effect. They don't just put, it's not like they're just going to shoot you up with this or that and see how it goes. They actually work you through the entire process and stay with you. These clinical trials are the bee's knees, if you will, the cat's meow. It's something that really, really needs to happen. And
Sadly,
it is
I'm the
prolific.
same age with you. I can relate to those expressions. But yeah, but that's exactly right. These clinical trials are game changers. And if you respond, and here's the deal, most of these trials will put you on drug eventually. They do what's called crossover design. And so
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
not always risking placebo. And so at the end of the day, um, these trials we've had people, without mentioning names of the drugs, on some of these, and they've been in remission for years.
Yep.
And while the drug is being reviewed by the FDA for final approval, most of the time, the vast majority of the companies will allow you to stay on drug for free until the drug's approved and put on the market. Um, we have a young man at NephCure who's really incredible, who has a really would normally be a hugely debilitating form of FSGS. It's called APOL1 and largely affects people of West African descent. And man, when you get that one, that's not good news.
Not
And
good
this
news.
gentleman
No,
is
it's
on a
not.
trial and he's now in full remission. And
See
so,
that
you know,
is that is oh man, just gives me chills. It gives me chills because I know that we're on the cusp. And when I was very active in DoD, we looked at a lot of clinical research programs, people wanting to advance into clinical trial or whatever, and we would look at different forms of the FSG model. And it made great strides, but there was never a jump There was never that jump that they had something to hang on to get to start the research trial. And now they do. And you're telling us about that. And I knew that when we first started that, and that was, I think, almost 12 years ago when I started at DOD working with these process research projects. I'll tell you what, I thought, man, they're a long ways away.
Yeah.
And one
It's a long process. And it's,
exactly
I spent 34 years in industry before coming to NephCure. And, a lot of people don't realize it. It is a high risk endeavor bringing a drug. Most drugs don't ever see the light of day.
nope,
Um,
nope,
they start in laboratory, and then you go to animal testing. And when you got enough data, the FDA takes a look and says, okay, you're ready for humans. And you go, like I said, through one, phase two, three.
three, yeah.
If you start with 100 drugs, only two will make it through the end.
Only two drugs out of a
Only
hundred.
two. Yeah. And so the fact that we now have 65 clinical human trials, that we've already
Really?
gone through a lot of that screening weed out process, half of those drugs are not going to make it, and that's kind of why drugs cost what they do. And, and we also can't guarantee everybody's going to have a great response to
Oh,
these
no, no.
trials, but it is definitely an option you ought to consider, and talk to your physician, talk to your family if it's right for you. But in many times it can be a game saver.
A lot of nephrology fellows uh, uh, need to look towards clinical trials and be more aggressive in recommending them to their patients. Period. I mean, I'm just going to say that again. Need to be
Yeah.
more aggressive in recommending them. All right. And if they don't have an explanation for really how it works, they need to get a hold of NephCure. I mean, come on. You have docs on staff that will talk to them. And I've encouraged two of my close friends in the nephrology world, and that's what they're doing. They're going to start reaching out.
Oh, that's great. Thank
Yeah.
you. I mean that with all sincerity. The reality is, got to give the nephrology community a little bit of break in that they didn't have a lot of clinical
Oh,
trials, a lot
no,
of
no,
to
no.
learn. And so this new group of fellows are coming through for the first time, are really getting exposed to the opportunity to
Right.
learn about and participate in clinical trials. So it, you know, folks listening, this is a new era, and it's with great enthusiasm. It is incredible the options that are available today. And like I said, the SGLT2 inhibitors are out there. These first two drugs got approved for IgAN, and there's many in late stage development for just about whatever nephrotic syndrome you have. Here,
There's
I
going to be
guarantee you,
something.
there's a trial going on right now for you.
Okay. So I think this is right. And you tell me if I'm wrong, correct me right away. Most patients who walk in and have no clue what's going on, and they have carrying a diagnosis of FSGS, and they're young, early. All right. That is the time that they've got to step up if they're listening. They have to step up and encourage their nephrologist or the PA, whoever's working with them. What is it that there is for me? What are my options? Is there not something that's going on now in trials or regulation or some way that I can say, no, I just don't want to be watching this thing. Watching and waiting in the kidney world is just not, should be removed from the vocabulary.
It's
There's no
never an
such
option
thing.
anymore, right?
No,
And that's the key, which is it doesn't have to be a clinical trial.
no.
There are off-label medications. There are other things that are going on. That there's even a device called liposorber, that for kids that it's a form of filtering, just like you're going in for dialysis, but it's
Mhm.
screening out a certain portion of lipids that we know are associated with certain forms, at least, of FSGS. And we've gotten a lot of kids into full remission with that. So, I guess the key is this, as you said, waiting and watching, that's never an option anymore. Don't let anybody tell you that that's what you got. And as soon as you do, give us a
Get somebody
call,
else. Yeah, that's
and
right.
we'll get somebody else to help add to the care team or new to the care team, because there are tremendous amount of options today. And the earlier you get, you can't wait, because often with waiting, things progress sometimes pretty quickly, and by the time you wait too long, you're no longer qualified for some of these other options.
Yeah, and the disease process can go so fast that it can't do anything. I mean, it's far too far advanced to arrest it, reseed it, or like you said, put it in remission. You have to start early, and you have to be willing to ask. You have to be willing to say, I don't get this. There's got to be something out there. Point me in the right direction. If the doc doesn't know, he needs to call NephCure. Pretty interesting
All
concept.
NephCure anyway.
Yeah, period.
You can't, never hurts to get a second, third, fourth opinion. And we have many patients who, we talk about the options, and they'll go through many physicians till they find the right one. And what's interesting is there's almost two worlds out there. We haven't talked about this, but
Oh,
the
I know.
pediatric
Coming.
patient and the
Yeah.
adult patient, right?
Yep.
Well, there is such a thing as a pediatric nephrologist,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only about a few hundred of them in the United States.
Very few.
So if you think about it, they see nephrotic syndrome all day long.
Yep.
And they're, just because they see it so often, they're all experts. And so with kids tend to see an expert in a matter
Right
of
off the mat. Right.
weeks to just a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Adults, because there's no, until recently anyway, no glomerular disease formal recognition within the nephrology community, it could take over a year before you get to a qualified glomerular disease specialist for your disease. And by then, as we talked about, it's often too late to intervene.
And because most of these folks, Josh, you know it very well. Most of these folks that have an early diagnosis of protein in their urine, they go in and they wait and they just watch it. And then they come in, they're advanced. They're well past, they're well past what a PCP is even going to want to look at. And when they pass them on with the nephrology community as busy as it is, a year, that could be a lifetime.
Yeah. And I, again, not to sound melodramatic, but we've got to get to a point, as I said earlier, a little bit of protein in the urine is like a little bit of cancer. All right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Are you really, would you be willing to accept that and say, watch it and wait? No, not really. You can't
No,
do that.
there's no reason for our listeners for you to have protein in your urine, period.
And do nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
if you have it, you've got to investigate it and you got to do something about it. And this is how you do. You can actually pick up the phone and call NephCure and tell them, the doc told me I've got protein in my urine. We're just going to watch it. But we don't watch anymore. You can't watch. You can't wait. It just has no reason in my mind after all these years having this. The minute something changed with me, I was on Dr. Mulgrew or one of the doctors right away, and they say, okay, here's what you got to do. They will find a way. But if they don't know, if you don't know, you've got to school yourself up, right? No pro.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the sad reality, is that you do have to school yourself up. You don't have to go to medical school,
No.
but you really need to take charge and learn about this disease. Eventually, you'll get in rhythm, as you know, with your body, and when you feel a
Yep.
certain way, you can almost tell when your protein's spilling just by how you're feeling.
Just look in the stool.
Uh, all kinds of ways, but the key is that don't ever accept that you just watch and wait. There's so many things and so many options today available. It is a different era than when you and I back when started
Oh,
having those issues.
do you know how
So,
I found out about protein in my urine?
all right,
I was drafted, did a draft physical,
I'll be darned.
and one of the medics, I wasn't in nursing yet. I was a lab technician. I dipsticked for urine and for protein and for ketones and for sugar. And so when that guy says, "Hey, Bresler's got protein in his urine," I said, "Okay." So at that point in time in my head, all right, so that's going to get me out, right? Oh no, that's just we're going to no problem. We'll just kind of keep eye on that. You go in, and I did my 2 years. But then as it progressed, and I realized as I got more education, to become an RN, then I realized what I had. Not very many people have that opportunity to do that. They just live with it. They see the doctor once a year. Oh yeah, you got 2+ protein. We'll just kind of keep on it. Well, by the time it gets to 4+, you're doomed. You
Yes.
need to be diagnosed earlier than that so you can start lowering that protein and finding out what in the world you have. Well, you have IgA. Do you have what kind of kidney disease do you have? You should never have protein in your urine. It doesn't happen. Maybe some, great runners, some of these marathon runners will spill some, but we're talking about something that's there at exam, and a lot of PCP offices don't even test for urine anymore. They don't even test urine. They do it in the lab if they order it, but if it doesn't get ordered, you don't know. So you should ask for a urine test
And that's something we used to do years ago, was dipsticks all the time,
all the
and
time.
physicians, problem was that depending on what story you hear and who knows what the truth was, but they stopped reimbursing for dipsticks.
They
So they
did.
stopped
Medicare
doing it.
stopped it. Yeah.
And so one story was, well, there was other things on the dipstick and showed false positives for other, blood illnesses like cancers. And so they stopped doing it. And so, that's the issue. We're not doing enough dipsticks.
No.
It's cheap. It's easy. We really
Five
got to
dollar
get to a
test.
point.
$5. Your
And
now is $5 test.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Five
And
dollars. You can do it yourself. You could actually walk
yeah,
in to the drugstore or to Walmart, wherever you go get your drugs, and you can go on the shelf and you can get a dipstick. You can get those dipsticks and do your own.
yeah.
You got to, you're
It's
only going to do it once, and you got to throw away quite a few of them, but at least you would know.
and maybe with the SGLT2 inhibitors that are on the market for chronic kidney disease for the 30 million Americans, maybe we'll start seeing a reverse of that and seeing
Hopefully,
more dipsticks coming back. And I
hopefully, right?
you
30
said something
million.
earlier. I think we ought to hit on also, which is the transplanted patients, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
and near and dear to your heart. And the reality is that people need to understand that unlike chronic kidney disease, like diabetic kidney disease,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Fred gets a transplant and he's good for another 30,000 miles. Um, when you have a rare kidney disease, it's a different situation, without getting all technical again, these humors, that the disease is, this poor kidney is kind of the innocent bystander. We often think of diseases by categories of organ. And the reality is they're systems, right? They're
Yes.
pathway diseases,
Yeah.
FSGS. We think most of the time is something floating in your system that is causing this, some chemical reaction and some pathway that's triggered. And it's the poor kidney that, gets the end injury. So when we get a patient who's transplanted, sometimes you're good for the rest of your life, but usually not. Right?
Yeah.
If you can get 10+ years out of a kidney with somebody with FSGS, that's a good transplant,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
right?
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
let's talk
Gosh.
about that
Yeah.
because it's not just we're talking about patients who are new to FSGS pre-transplant. The reality is you have FSGS, you have FSGS, and it's going to be with you. And so
Forever.
when we talk about keeping your kidney, we're talking about keeping either your native kidney or your transplanted kidney. So these drug trials, many of them are limited to non-transplant, but there are things that are going on. There are different kinds of studies, different kind of interventions that people are now looking at to keep your kidney. There have been tremendous breakthroughs in this chemical called nephrin, which is integral to the pathway of kidney disease. And brilliant scientist Astrid Weens up in Boston discovered these anti-nephrin antibodies. And now we're seeing commercial labs starting to test for these antibodies and saying, wow, if we can find a patient where this is implicated, we could treat these antibody with and dampen and
Hamper it
these
down.
this tamper it down
Mm-hmm.
and increase the likelihood of the survival of the new kidney or the kidney you got.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of stuff we can do for the transplanted community, in addition to those who have your native kidneys. So, everything we said about monitoring and watching is doubly true if you're a transplanted kidney
And
recipient.
transplant and FSGS, I can remember, and this is very, I don't know if it's typical, but I know the doctor that diagnosed me told me straight out, listen, Kent, he said, you have a horrible disease here. We don't know hardly anything about it. And we're talking back in 1980, 82, when I was 84 when I was diagnosed with biopsy. They had to send it off to John Hopkins at University of Texas. When they were looking at it, they really didn't know what in the world to call it.
Yeah.
Okay. And they sent it off to John Hopkins, and that's what they tagged it with. Focal segmental glomerular sclerosis is what they call it. And he said, you know what? The problem with it is we can transplant you, and I want you to get a transplant. I want you to be aware that I'm telling you this right now. This disease can and does come back and attack that transplanted kidney.
About half the time it comes back pretty soon and aggressive, and so it's
Yeah.
tough. I should have said this early on, guys. Everybody listening, I'm not a physician.
No.
I can't give medical advice, and at the end of the day, Kent and I are here to share experiences, what we've heard from many, many patients through the years. Please do consult before you do anything with qualified medical practitioner. But what I can share with you is, boy, the world is
It has
quite a
changed.
bit different. And
Yeah.
and along those lines of what you were saying with the coming back, you got to remember these diseases are diseases of pathways, and depending on the same with FSGS. Have you seen one FSGS patient? It's the old joke. You've seen
You've
one
seen one
FSGS
that's
patient.
right. That's
It's
exactly right.
such what we call heterogeneous diversity. It's very different pathways. Um, so really, everybody's unique and has to be looked at as an individual, and what's one true for one is may not be true for somebody else. So it makes it complicated.
Well, you mentioned you not being a doctor, neither am I. All right. And the whole point is here, you spent your whole life working in medicine, period. And your background uh, is pharmacy. That's really what it is. It's pharmacy, and are you a registered pharmacist? Or you tell the people what your background is?
Oh gosh, I'm one of these guys that knows enough to be dangerous. So that's why I say always
Like
disclaim,
me.
I'm not a physician, and don't take anything I say without talking to your doctor first.
Exactly. And
Um, but
that's
but the
true.
reality is, yeah, I spent I go as far as a biology undergrad, and I spent 34 years in industry working in clinical research and bringing drugs from the laboratory to
To the
uh,
patient.
to the patient,
Yeah, period. That's
in
what
all
we do.
kinds of roles. So that's as far as it goes. But it gives you a beautiful observation into hundreds of patients in different scenarios. And
Yeah.
so, what we can say is that watching it, the only thing I can say, I won't say an expert, but qualified at least, talk about is how the drug industry works and how we bring drugs to market and the options for patients. And it's an amazing situation. And what's beautiful about NephCure is we don't do any major initiative without five key stakeholders at the table. So what our role is working with you, Kent, and everybody, is that there are physician organizations like American Society of Nephrology,
Yep.
right? And then there is the FDA, and they have divisions, and one deals with renal. Then you have drug companies, and one drug company works in infectious disease, one works in renal, so they're different too.
Right.
Of course, we have patients, the most important group. And the next one is physicians who do the clinical research and
Mhm.
actually work with this, right? So the key is everybody's got to talk to each other because each one of these silos has their own initiatives. But as we all know, it takes a village. And hey, drug company, you got to talk to the docs and the patients and the FDA, and in order for us to make change. And so that's the role that I think you with Kidney Solutions and NephCure, we try to be a catalyst and bring everybody together and make sure we're all talking to each other. And it really does provide as a catalyst to accelerate the timeline dramatically
Right.
rather than leaving it organic. And so that's the beauty of, I think, what NephCure can bring to everybody is when you call, we'll know each company what they're doing, what each trial is going on. We talk to them every day about their trials. Um, Spoke with two companies today, various research. We engage with the FDA routinely. We engage with, I was the past couple of days with the Neptune study group, which I know you're part of,
Yeah.
which is a
Yep.
beautiful,
Oh,
great
wow.
gift to the world and observing for years, what happens with people with kidney disease. Matthias Kretzler and Laura Mariani out of University of Michigan and so many others. I mean, so we all talk with each other, and so what we can do, at Kidney Solutions and NephCure is provide you as a patient with what's going on beyond just the interaction with a physician, and talk about the options for the drug companies coming on. Talk about what the FDA is doing and their feelings about things. Talk about research that different physicians are doing that they may have a patient just like you. I guarantee there's somebody somewhere who's going through who may have failed, one of the drugs you're on that are being used off label and have a scenario. So that's what we can say is, we just talked to a patient just like you, and this is what happened, and here's a doctor you should talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. The Before we end here, I want to say that NephCure, uh, whoever is listening, and they listen for up till the time, we're going to have it. Excuse me. NephCure is going to be in San Antonio, and I believe it's May. I don't have the dates on top of my head here. I think it's in May.
Yep.
And you can go to the website and it'll give you an explanation of how you can, if you'd like to go to this, sign up to go to it's a 3-day event in San Antonio for kids, caregivers, transplant patients, and people on CKD and on dialysis. If they have protein spilling disease process, that will be the focus, and everybody needs to know you need to go there, and there's a lot of things that you can see and be educated on. But I want to say to you, Josh, this whole process now has enlightened me again. I try to stay on that website. You go to nephcure.com.
.org. Sorry. Yep.
Excuse me, .org. Yeah,
Sorry.
nephcure.org. And once you're there, you can navigate through the whole thing. And if you have trouble navigating, give me a call, right? I'm in it nearly, I won't say every day, but almost, I know weekly. At some point in time, I scrape myself off and get in there and take a look because this thing is moving so fast. Now, folks, I've had this disease, I know, since 1970. Okay.
Wow.
And went undiagnosed until I was 37 years old. Almost 17 years from the time I went in the army to the time I was transplanted. 17 years with a disease that I knew nothing or very little about until the very end when I was diagnosed with the biopsy. And it just buries the fact that if you have protein in your urine, you've got to investigate it. You as a person, that's your health, right? And there's lots of resources. You come to Kidney Solutions, you can go to NephCure. I don't care where you go, but don't wait. The worst thing that can happen to you is be told, well, let's just watch it. We talk about this in our support group all the time. If you're being told to watch this, you need to find another medical source to get your information. Maybe you even need to change a doctor or tell them you can't wait. You need a diagnosis. All right. It's hard to do. It's hard to say, you think, well, what the doctor knows best, but not always. You know best for your own self. You have to. This is what NephCure does for you. All of these research projects, big science, what it ends up being is your options. That's what you need to think about. What are my options? And you can't know unless you know what you got. So I'm going to give you a chance, my dear friend, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, to say anything that you want to close. But we're gonna head for supper.
Sounds like a plan. I first of all I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. Thank you for your patience with me with all the crazy travel schedules we had this year. But the good news is it's for a good reason. There's been so much going on in a great way. NephCure has expanded dramatically,
Oh my gosh.
and it's because of just trying to keep up with everything and so many opportunities. So we want to make sure that no patient misses an opportunity. So here's the deal. If you are a new patient, relatively new, um, I encourage you to come to San Antonio to that meeting that we talked about. Kent mentioned our patient summit. But if you can't, that's okay too. Please do call. We have what's called patient navigators. These are people who just spent their life helping you talk about disease, putting you in touch with other patients with it, making sure you're seeing the right doctor, making sure you're aware of all the options of trials, other off-label medications that have been tried, and even those devices like liposorber and things that we talked about. Issues with reimbursement for medication. Sometimes when it's off-label, it's hard to get reimbursed. Hey, I just got transplanted and it's coming back or something's going on. No
Yes,
matter what it is, trust me, we've seen it. Um, we have patients on staff. We have people who are experts in this. And it's really about getting in touch with your resources. And, there's a lot of folks and sources out there, but we try to present the full picture that can't, we were talking about today of all the
yep,
options because
yep.
you've got to see the full picture of things that are available to you. And so, you know, and you've got to really be the word, I know it's abused sometimes, but a self-empowered patient,
Right. First
meaning
advocate for your own self.
you got to learn about your disease. You've got to ask questions. You've got to question your physician, get a second, third opinion, and make sure that because you really have to look out for yourself. And that's what we're here to help you. We will hold your hand through the entire process if necessary. So we're here for you. Call anytime. Can't thank you enough for what you do. And because I know you're out there, I see at all the meetings, and so thank you for this great service you've given us. Thank you.
Anything that I can do for NephCure, I'll do. I'm all in. I'm all in with the NKF, AKP, AKF. Anything that has to do with kidneys, I'm all in. All I want to do is give people an option, give patients with kidney disease a chance to see what's in the world that could help them, right? And then be here like within our support group that we have every Monday night. You guys know it out there. We have, 40 and 45 people coming to that support group every Monday night at 6 o'clock Central Time. You're free. Just send me your email and I'll get you in. And then also make sure that you go to our podcast like this, Kent's Kidney Stories. All these are now, all of these people at Kidney Solutions are not paid. They do this for free, including myself. So everything that you get through Kidney Solutions or by Kidney Solutions, you'll never be billed for it. It's free. All right. Somebody says, oh, no, that can't be right. Well, oh, yes, it is right. Just check it out. Give us a call. We're here to help. And Josh, gonna have you back, and I can't wait to see you when we go to San Antonio. Have to take you to dinner.
I'll be buying. So
I'm only 60 miles away. So
fantastic.
yep,
I'm
back
looking
and
forward
forth.
to it.
Yep, we'll be there. All right, everybody, listen. Have a great have a great life. Make your life meaningful to yourself and to your family, but make sure you don't wait and don't watch. Just get busy taking care of your own health. Until next time, keep breathing.